Hi everybody, today we're going to install an upgraded AR stud kit and put a spring kit on, and we're actually going to put a terpolymer subchassis on there also. The tools that you need are right in front of you here. We have a pair of vice grips, and these are 5-inch, which is a good size to have to work underneath the turntable. It's okay if you have larger, but it's a good size. I've also got a good small size adjustable wrench. Again, a larger is fine, but this is a good size for working here. I've got a Sharpie, which I'll tell you what we're going to use for later. I've got a small nylon brush, which is good for cleaning out the area where the old stud goes into. And then I've got the kit that you order from us. I've got a spray duster, also for cleaning out one of the parts. And as far as setup, I know you folks at home probably don't have a special table for working on suspended subchassis turntables, so I have a setup today of what you probably would have, and what I have is quart-sized paint cans, 4 of them, one on each corner, supporting the table, and I just have it faced up right now. I've got something in the bearing well, so oil's not going to spill all over the place when I take it out, and obviously you can tell by looking at the table that I've removed the belt, the drive platter, and the outer platter, and obviously the dust cover. I also have the Tonearm secured. And this, you can see there's a cartridge on there, but this is an old cartridge. I'm not worried about that cartridge in terms of it possibly getting ruined, but obviously if I was, I'd have a stylus guard, or I would remove the head shell if it was a head shell that was removable. And so I'm going to turn the turntable over now. We're going to begin the job. Okay, I'm going to remove, as you can see, I removed 3 of the feet now. I'm just going to remove the last foot and take off the bottom. Sometimes these are straight edge, sometimes they're Phillips. Just lifting off the bottom. So this is your subchassis. It's T-shaped, and because we're going to be putting the terpolymer subchassis on, we need to remove the Tonearm. There's a, out of the camera view, there's a wire connector holder that I'm just unscrewing from the wall of the turntable. Sometimes there's a couple of those in the turntable. This one happens to have just one. So this wire is completely free now, and I'm going to remove the DIN connector from the bottom of the arm, and I'm going to use the small adjustable now to loosen the 4 nuts that hold the arm board in place. You're going to often find that these are loose. It's very, very common that these over time just loosen up from the vibration of the turntable. These are barely taking any effort at all to loosen. Okay, so I'm supporting the arm from underneath, and I'm just removing these nuts and washers. Again, I have one hand underneath supporting it so the arm doesn't go crashing onto the work table beneath me. 2. 3. And 4. And I see this one has a screw I don't usually see there into the arm board. Never seen one with that in there. Again, supporting the arm from beneath. The screw is a little bit tight. And that's how easy it is to remove an arm on a table, and why the mid-80s ARs are so desirable. That's how easy it is. Okay, we're going to now remove the studs and springs from the subchassis, releasing the chassis. These are sometimes really stuck on, other times not, but basically I compress the spring down and then check and see how tight they are. This one's actually only hand tight, but if it wasn't, that's where I'd be using the small adjustable. Nut comes off. Grommet comes off, whole spring comes off. You can see they used to use a kind of foam inside the spring as well. And this is where the vice grips come in. probably not likely to use this stud over again, but it's still good to probably not do it on the area of the threads. And basically you just turn that. Again, sometimes these are easy, sometimes they're hard. This one was pretty loose. And you loosen that by hand. I just wanted to point out the difference in length of these. And what that length allows is the spring to not be compressed as much when it's on there. AR used some kind of adhesive in the thread hole, so you want to clean that out. So I'm using the nylon brush, just going around in those threads, and then the air duster. Okay, I've got all of the screws and springs removed now, and I realized I forgot to tell everybody what the marker was used for. Sometimes as you're using the vice grips, you can't tell whether or not the stud is actually moving or not. So a little trick I developed over time was to just use the marker and make a line on it. And it just helps to tell you whether the stud is actually turning or not. It's tough to tell sometimes. So that's done. And nothing is holding the subchassis in place right now. We're going to remove that. That's out of the place. Remember that I went through and I've cleaned and air dusted all of these holes. That's been done. And I'm going to talk about the new subchassis now. This was first developed by George Merrill, as many of you know from reading on the site, and Anthony Cilia was the one who basically refined it and found better materials to make it out of, improved the bearing design. And as you can see in the back, you've got your ground hooked up to it. One of the things that Anthony added was these countersinks for where the springs will be held, which really helps to firm and make the chassis easier to adjust. This particular one, for those of you who know SME arms, is cut for an SME arm. We're not going to show that installation today, but we've got that all set up also. Okay, this just lays in place. It's pretty obvious to see how it all lays into place. And we're going to install one stud at a time here. I hand screw them in first, making sure, very careful to make sure that it's not going into the thread wrong. And then I use the vice grips far down on the stud and turn it so it's tightened. And it usually doesn't take much. This one, about a quarter of a turn and it's done. You don't want to torque that too much because of the way that the actual screw is installed. Okay, I'm going to take you through the very last part of the installation. I'm just going to show you one, not all three. You put the spring on, and again the Turpolymer subchassis has a recess. I'm screwing the spring into the recess for a nice tight taut fit. If this were the regular subchassis, there's a lip there and it just sets on the lip. This is a nice tighter, firmer fit for better adjustment. This is a rubber grommet that comes with the spring kit. That goes on next. Then you have a large washer, a thrust bearing which prevents the spring from binding, a great addition. And then you have a smaller washer, and then you have two choices of nuts, a nylon and a locking nut. I personally prefer the nylon nut because of the greater level of adjustability, and then when I get it in the area that I want, I sometimes use some nail polish, just a touch of it where I want it to be, and you're just fine. You're not going to tighten this too much, just a few turns to get it taut. And then you would move on to the other three, install those, and then the next part would be to tune the suspension of the turntable, which we're not going to get into today. So I hope this was informative for you to show how to install a Turpolymer subchassis and also how to install a new spring and stud kit. Have a great day.